for him. As a humble Vaishnava, he accepted blessings from all the sages before riding on the plane brought by the chief of the Vaikunta associates. So maybe we are reading more than what I looked at the schedule and I saw for Thursday, these were the verses. So I just started reading them, but maybe we have to go back. Is that what you're saying, Leela Manjari? Oh, okay. Looks like some verses were. Ruchi, do you know if previous few days the class was there and what verses were done?
No, when I joined, nobody was online.
Okay, what about day before yesterday?
I don't remember. I don't think I joined.
Okay, so it looks like maybe we have gone ahead and we should actually be going back. What should we do? Where did we stop? Does anybody know when the last class, where it ended? Does anyone know?
We haven't had a class for the last 4-5 days, I know.
Okay, that means we had stopped. Let me see, because I remember we had done some verses and Lavanya Mataji was there on the call that time. Maybe we need to go back. You were also there, no? Yeah, we finished this one. We did 17. I remember this. Yeah, we did this one. We finished 17 and I think we are on 18. Yes, we stopped at 17. Let's go back because that's the last one we did. So let's go back in the proper sequence. We are on 18 now. Bhaktim haro bhagavati pravahan ajashram ananda bashpa kalaya muhur adyamanaha viklidayamana hridaya pulakarchitango natmanam asmara asav iti mukta lingaha. Ruchi, do you want to read?
No,
no. Okay. That's all right. I was just asking. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Because of his transcendental bliss, incessant tears flowed from his eyes. His heart melted, and there was shivering and standing of the hairs all over his body. Thus transformed in a trance of devotional service, Dhruva Maharaj completely forgot his bodily existence, and thus he immediately became liberated from material bondage. Purport. Due to constant engagement in devotional service, hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping the deity, etc., as prescribed in 9 varieties, there are different symptoms which appear in the body of a devotee. These 8 bodily transformations, which indicate that a devotee is already liberated within himself, are called Ashta Vikara. When a devotee completely forgets his bodily existence, he should be understood to be liberated. He is no longer encaged in the body. The example is given that when a coconut becomes completely dry, the coconut pulp within the coconut shell separates from the bondage of the shell and the outer covering. By moving the dry coconut, one can hear that the pulp within is no longer attached to the shell or to the covering. Similarly, when one is fully absorbed in devotional service, he is completely disconnected from the two material coverings, the subtle and the gross bodies. Dhruv Maharaj actually attained this stage of life by constantly discharging devotional service. He has already been described as a Mahabhagavat. For unless one becomes a Mahabhagavat or a first class pure devotee, these symptoms are not visible. Lord Chaitanya exhibited all these symptoms. Thakur Haridas also exhibited them. And there are many pure devotees who manifested such bodily symptoms. They are not to be imitated. But when one is actually advanced, these symptoms are exhibited. At that time, it is to be understood that the devotee is materially free. Of course, from the beginning of devotional service, the path of liberation immediately opens, just as the coconut taken from the tree immediately begins to dry. It simply takes some time for the shell and the pulp to separate from one another. An important word in this verse is Mukta Lingaha. Mukta means liberated and Linga means subtle body, the subtle body. When a man dies, he quits the gross body, but the subtle body of mind, intelligence, and ego carries him to a new body. While existing in the present body, the same subtle body carries him from one stage of life to another. For example, from childhood to boyhood by mental development. The mental condition of a baby is different from that of a boy. The mental condition of a boy is different from that of a young man. And the mental condition of a young man is different from that of an old man. So at death, the process of changing bodies takes place due to the subtle body. The mind, intelligence, and ego carry the soul from one gross body to another. This is called transmigration of the soul. But there is another stage when one becomes liberated even from the subtle body. At that time, the living entity is competent and fully prepared to be transferred to the transcendental or spiritual world. The description of the bodily symptoms of Sri Dhruva Maharaj makes it apparent that he became perfectly fit to be transferred to the spiritual world. One can experience the distinction between the subtle and gross bodies even daily. In a dream, one gross body is lying on the bed, while the subtle body carries the soul, the living entity, to another atmosphere. But because the gross body has to be continued, the subtle body comes back and settles in the present gross body. Therefore, one has to become free from the subtle body also. This freedom is known as Mukta Linga. So it is 5:26 already. I think because this purport is very long with 3 paragraphs, I think we'll just stop with this one. Is that okay? And we can all share some realizations and have a discussion. Is that all right? So here, Srila Prabhupada is describing what happens to a devotee who is slowly getting fully absorbed in the process of devotional service, which means he's coming back to his normal position actually, because the soul is eternally engaged in the service of the Lord. It is only because of this gross body, mind, and senses that we are caught up in the material energy, but actually the nature of the soul is what? Satchit Ananda, same as the Lord, but minute in quantity. So a devotee who is nicely making progress on this path of devotional service, he's coming closer and closer and closer to who he really is, the spirit soul. And so when he engages in these 9 processes, what are they? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Sakhyam, Archanam, Vandanam, Sakhyam, Dasyam, Atma Nivedanam. So these 9 processes, as the devotee engages continually, what happens? He becomes more and more spiritualized. And then there are 8 bodily transformations. That means he becomes completely liberated within himself. What is the meaning of liberation? Liberation means he's no longer affected by the material energy. He's aloof from the material energy. Material energy cannot touch him. That means heat, cold, hunger, thirst, pain, sorrow, fame, infamy, all these things make no difference to a devotee who's completely achieved pure devotion for the Lord. And then in his body, what symptoms manifest? Says there are 8 different symptoms which are called Ashta Sattvika Vikar. He completely forgets his body existed. And you can see that this person is off the bodily platform. They are not at all affected by what is happening either with their bodies or their mind, because they are completely absorbed in loving devotion to the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna. And such a devotee, you can see, is completely liberated. And so we say, how can this be? So Srila Prabhupada gives a very nice example to demonstrate this in real life. It's like a coconut. Once the coconut, inside the pulp of the coconut, in the beginning it is what? Very, very soft, like creamy. When you break it open, you can just drink that sweet pulp of the coconut. Then as the coconut matures more and more, the pulp becomes thicker, harder, bigger, and so on. And finally, it is very stuck hard to the shell of the coconut on the inside, and you have to break the shell in order to get the coconut, scrape it, and eat that coconut. But supposing we left it alone, slowly, slowly the pulp dries out even more and more and more, and now it is detached from the shell, so that when you shake it, you can actually hear it has separated, and it will make a sound like a bead in a glass ball or something like that. You get a feeling that this inside this coconut, the shell has completely separated from the pulp, and the pulp has become one whole, can say like a ball or a sphere inside the coconut shell. So similarly, the devotee who becomes more and more spiritualized, he becomes completely detached from the material energy, and though he is in the material mind and body, he is no longer affected by that because he's completely on spiritual platform. So this is a very significant thing for us to remember, because this is the state we want to be in. We want to be completely detached from the material energy, just like this coconut pulp, which has now become so dry and hard that it no longer is attached to the shell. So who attained this stage? Dhruva Maharaj, by constantly engaging himself in devotional service. What happens? He became completely disconnected from the 2 material coverings, the gross and the subtle body. So now he is called a Mahabhagavat. So he's a very, very highly elevated devotee. That's why he's called Mahabhagavat, or first class pure devotees. Unless one reaches this point, all these symptoms are not there. Lord Chaitanya exhibited these symptoms. Charidas Thakur exhibited them. Even Narottam Das Thakur exhibited them. But they are not like that many great saints. But you cannot imitate them. And only when one is really, really and truly advanced, these symptoms will manifest. Then you know this devotee is liberated and off the bodily platform. An important verse in this word is Mukta Linga. Mukta means what? Liberated. And Linga means the subtle body. When a man dies, what happens to him? Can anyone tell me? Anybody would like to try what happens? When a man, we say, oh, this man died, that man died, COVID came, and this woman died, this old man died, this young lady died, whatever it is, we say this person has died, isn't it? But what is exactly happening here? What happens is he may shed the gross body, but because the attachments and the desires and fruitive activities and fruitive mentality is still there, the subtle body, which consists of the mind, intelligence, and false ego, which is surrounding the soul. There is the gross body, there is a subtle body, and then there is the soul. So what does the subtle body do? It simply carries the soul into the next body, which will be more conducive for carrying out all those desires, whatever the person had. And so therefore it is very important to be careful what we desire, because if we want to live like a hog and dog, that will happen. If we want to live like a tree, that will also happen. So we will show the Lord what kind of life we want next by our activities in this present life. If all the while, we are flaunting our bodies and, putting on bare minimum clothing, and any chance you get, you expose your body. Krishna says, oh, you like to expose your body, become a tree. Whole day, whole night out in the open, subjected to all the elements, you can have the best possible situation to flaunt your body and expose yourself, be a tree. So this is a very difficult thing, to become a tree is not so elevated after being a human being. So we don't want to lose this opportunity to go back to Godhead. In fact, the human form of life is the only loophole, as Prabhupada says, where we can perfect our life and we can go back home. So we must also spiritualize what? Our subtle body. It's not enough just to partially engage in devotional service. We must go fully, dive into it fully, so that we can become fully spiritualized. So, we can see that in the present body, we move from one situation to another, one age to another, baby, then little girl, then big girl, then tween rather, then teen, and then young adult, then adult, and so on, middle age, old age. Like this, we keep going through different ages and different stages. And so what is actually death? Death is nothing but change of body. That means the body of the old dress. You can say this body is like a dress for the soul. The old dress is discarded and the new dress is put on. And this is the meaning of death. And people get so frightened and they get so panicky, thinking they don't even want to talk about it. So we try to give this knowledge to free them from the fear and the cycle of birth and death. We want to give them this knowledge. So again, to come back to this example, the mentality of a baby is different from a boy, different from an adult, and so on. So different of a young man, mentality of a young man is different from an old man. So at death, what happens? The changing of bodies takes place due to the subtle mind, the subtle body rather, which consists of the mind, intelligence, and false ego, and it carries the body from one material situation to another, one material situation to another. So this is the danger of forgetting what is the value of human form of life and going after that. You will get caught by Maya and she will take you on a trip everywhere. She will not let you progress because you are in her hands now. So we don't want to be in the hands of Maya. We don't want to be caught like that. So therefore we are taking shelter of Krishna. And so we can avoid the transmigratory cycle. That means we don't have to come back here in the cycle of birth and death, take birth again in the mother's womb and go through all that. We don't have to. We can choose to go back to Krishna by taking to this process called Krishna consciousness. That's called transmigration of the soul. That's what happens at the time of death. Soul leaves and goes to another body. So we don't want to take birth as an animal, dog, cat, hog, stool, So some of these creatures, their habits are very disgusting also. We don't want to lose our human form and come back in a lower life form such as animals and so on. Not that any creature is lower, because in Krishna's eyes, every creature is very dear to him. So in Krishna's eyes, every creature is dear, but at the same time, the mentality of a dog is different from that of a hog, different from that of a rooster, different from that of a cat. Anything you take is different. But we are not interested in coming back and taking on another body. We want to go back to Krishna. That's what we want. So we want to strive for getting free of the clutches of the material energy. So that time we will become completely liberated. That means free of all these things. Then what happens? Let's say, but there is another stage where one becomes liberated even from subtle body. Then the living entity is perfectly in a position to transfer himself to the spiritual world. Go straight to the spiritual world by taking shelter of remembrance of Krishna. So now let's come back again. Here the purport is talking about Dhruva Maharaj. So this wonderful narration of Dhruva Maharaj, what does it say? That he was a perfect king and he knew the difference between distinction between subtle and material. And he knew how to carry out all the different functions of the different ages and stages of life. So again, to refer to paragraph 2 of our purport today, it is definitely something to think about, because if you want to come back again to this material world as a preacher, even if it's something that is wanted very much by you, unless you really have the security, how do we know we'll get there? We don't know. The description of bodily symptoms of Dhruva Maharaj makes it apparent that he became perfectly fit to be transferred to the spiritual world. So we must qualify. Go back just like that is not easy, isn't it? So even in one's dream, you can't keep the boy under lock and key, or you cannot get him to do what you want him to do, because like it says over here, supposing the king is lying on the bed and having a dream, in his mind, his subtle body is carrying him to another neighboring country. Maybe he's doing battle with them. He's trying to fight for adding to his kingdom. We don't know. But in the morning, wakes up and he's right back where he is. So what went over there? His mind and his senses. They went to that place being dragged by the illusory power of Maya. So we don't want to be caught like this. We want to be very, very perfectly situated. So moment of death, we think of Krishna and go back to Krishna. So becoming liberated from the gross and subtle body is very, very important. Thank you very much. Any questions? Is that okay? Does anybody have anything to say? Because of the gross body, the subtle body comes back and settles in the gross body. That is the soul being carried to the next body by the subtle body. But we want to be liberated from this also. That means we want to be free of not just the gross, we want to be free of the subtle body also. Mind, intelligence, and false ego also need to be totally purified. Then one who has this freedom is known as Mukta Linga. It means what? He is free. Free of what? Free of? Can anyone tell me free of what? Cycle of birth and death. So he doesn't have to come back again. He has given up the grip of Maya and he's now completely under Krishna. And so at the time of death, he'll remember Krishna, go back to Krishna. So let's continue with a small discussion if you like. We have about 15-20 minutes. Is that okay? Anybody would like to say anything? Rohini Mataji or Ruchi Mataji, you have any questions, comments? Hello, anyone there? Any questions, any comments? Okay, we will stop there then. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Shall we end the class over here, devotees? We just did one purport because we started late, and also this purport is very long. Okay, thank you all very much. Hare Krishna.